Hey there, welcome to the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast. I'm Ryan Burr, joined as always by the founder of the Junior Golf Hub, Roger Nick. And Roger, it is Open Championship week. The Scottish Open just finished. Rory McIlroy back in the winner's circle. A lot really going in a positive direction for golf. Going to take a bit of a left turn this week. We're going to get into some rules, players following rules, things along those lines. We'll have Steve Scott as our guest today, the famous player that played Tiger Woods in the 1996 U.S. Am and didn't really call a rules violation, but pointed something out to Tiger that had he not, he would have won the U.S. Am and everything that would have come with it. So I want to start with this with you. Obviously, you've been around this great game for a long time, forever, centuries dubbed as the gentleman's game. Have you seen a little bit of a pivot from the gentleman's game more towards the competitive other sports? Like, think about it. In baseball, you try to steal second base. I mean, you try to take advantage. Like if you slide in safe, or if you're batting and there's a strike that you know is a strike, but the umpire calls it a ball, it's not like, hold on, Mr. Umpire, that was a ball or a strike. So, you know, football, certainly offensive lineman, you try to get away with holding, or basketball, you know, you're not going to call yourself for a traveling violation. Do you see any separation where golf is losing a little bit of that gentleman's game?
Well, Ryan, I think you make a good point. Obviously, seeing the last few weeks on the LPGA, what's been going on, and obviously there's some incidents on the PGA Tour as well that makes us kind of think about that. I just think it's really just we've gotten lazy. I just think that now that we're so used to looking at our phones or asking questions or people doing things for us, I think honestly, I just think it's just laziness on the player's part of kind of just thinking that, hey, you know what, I know the rules. I don't need to worry about it so much. Somebody's going to tell me if I'm done something wrong, or my caddy will, you know, help me out. And, you know, listen, I'm sure you just saw the thing with Lydia Ko, 7 strokes, a penalty of not replacing her ball mark, right? And I mean, that's a good, you know, example of probably just a little brain dead and kind of just relying on, oh, well, you know, I've got to move my mark back, and their caddy forgot, and players are kind of going, I'm not going to say anything until it's done, right? So are we regressing? I think it's competitive. I think people want to win. I think people are, you know, to your point of, you know, golfers saying, you know, I want to get that next spot up versus not calling or helping out. I mean, our guest today is a great example of the gentleman's game of saying, hey, you know what, you need to move your mark back. So so really cool thing, and I'm looking forward to that story today. But yeah, I just think it's just laziness. And, you know, one of the things that we try to do with all of our junior golfers, I mean, we actually have rule quizzes every week. We put a rule book in their bag, and we say it's there to help you, not hurt you. Lean on the rules to help, you know, as much as you possibly can to your advantage. I mean, I think there's a lot of rules there that if you take advantage of the rule, you will come out ahead versus trying to make up something on your own or relying on a player to tell you what you did wrong or didn't do wrong.
How often do you see a junior player, and I'll tell you that 90% of them have even very little grasp of some of the simplest rules and need verbatim instructions on taking a drop or an unplayable lie. Do you think that this is, I agree with you on the lazy part, but should coaches, should high school coaches, should parents, as you said, the rules are there to, I mean, certainly they can't help you in a lot of cases. Like, I think the most least utilized rule of all is when you're around the green and there's a sprinkler head, that, you know, there are rules there where you can make the shot actually easier. And that sounds like, oh, I'm not saying cheat. I'm just saying follow the rule to the letter, and you're going to end up with an easier shot. And I don't think kids have a clue of, I'll say 90%, 95% of the rules in there.
No doubt. I mean, again, like I said, we take our juniors through a rules test, and we show them, you know, we outline, we do a little thing in their yardage books to make sure that they have, like, kind of addressed the basic rules, if you will. However, when you have parents who are involved, and I don't want to throw any parent under the bus necessarily, but you get a lot of parents who are caddying who go, don't worry about it. I got you. I'll take care of the rules. You don't worry about that. You just play golf. Again, back to what that leads to is the player not taking ownership or responsibility and knowing the rules, right? So, and then again, in a lot of cases, the parents, the rules probably just enough that don't, to your point, don't take advantage of the letter of the rule. And again, it's there to help, not hurt, and to guide us. So, yeah, I think we could do better with it for sure.
How much is the USGA and the R&A dropping the ball with just too many rules and the way they're written? They are written where if you're talking about a 10, 9, 10, 11-year-old kid, I mean, it's like reading Shakespeare.
No doubt about it. Listen, I'm guilty. I failed the rules test, I don't know, 2-3 times at least. It's very difficult. The decisions of the rules, all of that good stuff that you need to pass the rules test. And the changes. I mean, just don't forget. I mean, we just went through, the RNA and the USGA just went through another iteration of changes over the last 2 years that even the simplest thing of, hazard, right? I mean, red hazard, being a lateral, whatever it is now, whatever it's called now, right?
Right.
I think that's where kids get, kids get a little shaky on what to do. Even I just was recently in a tournament myself, and we came across a situation very similar where, we had a senior player who just didn't know what to do and just pulled out the rule book and said, okay, let's read the rule. Here you go. Right. And he was like, oh my God, I didn't realize I could do that now. I mean, it actually helped him. Right. So it was, it's pretty amazing how lazy we have gotten.
When you think about, like, I started the podcast with other sports where you're not trying to cheat, but you are trying to get away with things. And that was never golf. I immediately think of the anchor ban with the putter. I mean, more and more guys are going back to the long putter, which was banned because you weren't allowed to anchor, and now you're quote unquote not anchoring. And then the rule says that, well, you may be anchoring, but if you're intending not to anchor, it's okay to anchor. Like, do you think guys are knowingly getting away with stuff now and they're okay with it and sleep fine at night?
I definitely think they sleep fine at night. I think they are going to push the envelope, if you will. I know I read somewhere on one of the, some kind of media, social media, somebody was talking about Bernard Longer, how close he seems to be in that regard, right? And it's clear they've showed some very, high definition, angles of his putter not being anchored to his chest the way it was, or his hand being anchored to his chest. However, I mean, people are looking at it. They are noticing that he is awfully close to that, right? I mean, and he's as honest as they come, right? So he's going to get away or try to get away with as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And do you see, I mean, there certainly was a time, Roger, where guys were actually, penalizing themselves where, I need to take a one-stroke penalty there. My ball oscillated, or, that's probably the one. That's probably the one that. So if you're in the rough, and you ground your club, Roger, the ball's going to move.
It has potential. It has. I mean, listen, you saw Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah, but not even really potential, Roger. I mean, if you ground your club in the rough behind the ball is going to. Quote unquote, I'm not saying there's no advantage gain, but that ball is going to move. There's just no, it's gravity. You're pushing it, you're grounding your club, which is going to change the resistance for the ball just slightly. I mean, that has to happen every single time a professional player is in the rough. Or let me change that. That has to happen a high percentage of the time.
High percentage of the time, no doubt, especially the rough that these guys are playing in, that, like the fescue rough, stuff like that. Bermuda rough, it's obviously a little bit different, but my guess is that, everybody approaches it with the idea that, hey, I want to be as careful as possible, the intention not to make the ball move. But it does. I mean, listen, I think, you and I are both golfers, and we know plenty of golfers, and I think we sit there and say, hey, I didn't do anything to make it move, but You did, right? I mean, you put the club down, near or around the ball, and it probably, shifted down, if nothing else, right? I mean, that's to your point of gravity.
But that's a penalty.
It would definitely be called a penalty. Yeah.
And then the other tricky part now is with, as you said, with the eye in the sky. I mean, that's probably what's ultimately in the back of everyone's mind is the worst thing you can be labeled is obviously a cheater. So if you're playing an event, I mean, we've seen some players that it might be the most difficult label to shed in sports, especially in golf.
No doubt. I mean, we know probably a Ryder Cup player right now that the U.S. is called Mr. Captain America, right, who is struggling to shed that label because there's been several incidents that have followed, since the infamous one in Albany, right? So it is a tough one. And I think, we had an incident recently with a junior golfer in a Northeast major event. He said, she said kind of thing. And ultimately, after the round, he came back and said, hey, I admit that I did something wrong, which I thought was, one, it took a lot of courage. And two, I commend him for the field or protecting the field because he actually had a good round. But he DQ'd himself because of that. And would love to see more of that. And unfortunately, we don't see enough of that in junior golf for sure. But I think the expectation put on some of these juniors, it forces them to feel like they have to do this. Hey, I got to go home and tell my mom and dad I did so great. And, 79 versus 80 sounds quite a bit different, right? So.
And we now welcome in our guest today, the author of Hey Tiger, Move Your Mark Back, Steve Scott. And Steve, thank you for joining Roger, Nick, and I here on the Hub of Junior Golf podcast. Let's start a little bit about it. Our conversation today, Steve, is just how the quote-unquote gentleman's game, especially in the junior game, seems to be moving more and more towards where maybe some of the other sports are. For example, in football, if you get away with holding the opposing player, you don't raise your hand and say, Mr. Official, I just held him. Please give me a 10-yard penalty. Or if you're a batter and it's a strike, but the umpire calls a ball. So you get my drift. Golf obviously has been built on integrity. You, in your instance, which we'll get into, obviously this was a major situation on the line, and your integrity still told you that was the right thing to do. 1996, a long time ago. You've lost a couple hairs since then, Steve. But in all reality, do you think golf is moving away from that spot that it kind of had to all to itself, which was the quote unquote gentleman's game?
Well, thanks for noticing the do. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think look, the advent of social media since the late 2006, 2007, whenever Twitter and Instagram, everything came out, I think you're seeing a lot more of I think maybe the good aspects of sport overall outside of the game really are maybe almost being more applauded or at least shown out there in the world. You see, unfortunately in our game of golf, Patrick Reed, he has gotten a lot of notoriety, I guess, for the wrong reasons, for doing some things that were pretty suspect and, moving sand behind his golf ball in the Bahamas and whatnot. And then you think of other sports and you think of the Houston Astros banging on the garbage can. You think of Lance Armstrong and all the cyclists and all the things that people are trying to do to get an edge. And yeah, I think that there are the competition is so fierce that I think people lose sight of the fact that the first rule of the game is to play with integrity. Rule 1.2 in the book. Look it up. It's I can't think of any other sport that has that as their first rule.
It's a great point. And really, I implore all of our listeners, Steve, when we started this podcast, the real reason for doing it is there are more competitive junior golfers playing this game than any other metric in the game of golf. There's more junior golfers than professionals. There's more junior golfers than men or women that play golf. and it's an underserved community. So let's just start by saying I think every child and parent needs to read your book, Steve. Not because they're going to learn about rules of golf. That's not what this book is at all about. What it's about? It's about integrity. It's about one of the great stories of an underdog and the greatest player ever going head to head in one of the biggest championships in the world. So quickly, why don't you just take us back to 1996 at Pumpkin Ridge? It's the United States Amateur, and you are in the championship against?
Oh, some guy named Tiger Woods. You may have heard of him.
Now, how much older are you than Tiger at this point?
I'm younger. I'm actually a year and a half younger than Tiger. So Tiger had just finished his sophomore year at Stanford, and I just finished my freshman year at University of Florida. And so, yeah, he was going for history, 3 U.S. amateurs in a row. Nobody in the history of golf had ever won 3 in a row. And the only guy in his way was little old me, who was getting outdriven by 50 and 60 yards. And, the golf world, I mean, was definitely, I was cheering for Tiger a lot more than me because, they didn't know who I was. Tiger was going for history that Jack Nicklaus, Bobby Jones, Arnold Palmer, nobody had ever accomplished it. So it was a pretty monumental day.
So tell me about the start of that day. Do you think Tiger took you serious? Did you believe you could win?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have put up the fight that I did if I didn't believe I could win. I think that I remember walking down the first hole and noticing for the first time that he didn't have his sports psychologist caddying for him. It was the first final match. Jay Brunza has been his sports psychologist was for a long time, and he was caddying for him every previous USGA final that he made, the 5 previous, the 2 amateurs and the 3 juniors. But it was a friend of his, Brian Bell, who was on the bag. And I guess, Tiger had learned all the lessons that he needed, and he was ready to go. And he had his buddy caddying for him. And I turned to my girlfriend, who was caddying for me at the time. Now my wife, we're over 24 years now. And I said, this guy doesn't have his sports psychologist with him. He doesn't have a security blanket. I'm going to crush him. And that was my mentality walking down the first hole. And I firmly believe that. I was 5 up after 18, and I shot 2 under par in the second 18. And, unfortunately, that wasn't enough. So I think if anybody out there is 5 up and shoots 2 under par in the second 18, they're probably going to win. And especially on a USGA setup. And for me, it just, it wasn't in the cards, but.
All right. Well, let's talk about a little bit about the 5 up. You're 5 up after 18. How long's the break?
It was a 90-minute intermission. We finished kind of early. We were out on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon, and I think it was a television thing. Wanted to make sure that there was enough holes that were going to be shown. Because shoot, if I maintain, if I just tie him for the first 9 holes, I'm 5 up with 9 to play. I mean, it's probably over. So yeah, and he whittled away 4 forced holes at the turn to make it only 1 up going into the last 9. But yeah, it was some sort of turn of events. He played really poorly in the morning 18, and I played very well. I shot 68 probably, and he probably shot 75 or 6, and yeah. So we're heading into the last 9 holes, and I feel like the momentum is certainly on his side, and I hold an unbelievable flop shot. I missed the green on a par 3 10th, the 28th hole, and he hit the green, and I was up first. I hit this flop shot. It was running away from me. I had about 12 feet of green to work with, and it just you probably couldn't keep within 10 or 12 feet at least, and I happened to hole it, and he missed his birdie putt, so I'm back to 2 up, and then the next hole he comes back and holes like a 40-footer for eagle with probably a 3 or 4 foot break late in the putt. It was and I'm up there about this far for birdie. I mean, I've got a gimme birdie on his par 5, and he hits it just holds this crazy putt to turn the tide back to him. Fist pumping the whole thing, and it was this ebb and flow, and then all of a sudden, a couple holes go by, we tie, and now I'm 2 up with 3 to play, and things are really looking good for me.
Yeah. So let's go through the last three.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm 2 up with 3 to go, and we both hit driver down the fairway. He'd hit a lot of 2 irons in that second 18 to make sure that he was hitting into the green first. The driver. And so we both hit our best drives, and he outdrove me by 53 yards. He had a sand wedge to the green. I had 6 iron, and my 6 iron, I missed it to the right in the green side bunker, and his sand wedge kind of one hopped in the back rough and spun down the hill about 6 feet from the hole. And all of a sudden, I hit my bunker shot out to 10 feet, and so I'm looking at my putt, and it's got about a cup break left to right. And I'm looking at the break, and his ball mark is right in my line of putt. And so, like you would any day playing, for fun or in a tournament or whatever, you say, hey, just move that over, 1 putter head length. And so he did. And I had to make my putt to make his putt mean anything. And I get up there and I hold my putt. I mean, I'm nervous as anything. And I hit this great putt right in the center. I mean, I couldn't hit a better putt. And he gets up there, and I'm walking off the green, really happy, and really, just like, wow, this what a moment this is to hole a putt. And I kind of look out of the corner of my eye, and he had already put his ball down on the green. He had put his ball in the wrong spot, and if anybody knows match play rules, you can't, if you play from the wrong spot in match play, it's an automatic loss of hole. It's not even a shot penalty or 2 shots like it is in stroke play. It's a total loss of hole, which means I would have won the match. And so, I think the lesson really to be learned that I've certainly thought about for 27 years now is that golf as a junior golfer, you learn lessons that sometimes you don't realize that you learned them until you're in a moment where it's so important, where you're so nervous and you're basically letting your instincts take over, right? When you're very nervous, it's all the training that you do and everything that you learn. There's not a lot of conscious thought when you're that nervous, I guess. So it was this thing, this fact that I learned, this great reason of why we all play by the spirit of the game. And it just happened to show up in a moment where it was the most important moment of my entire life on the golf course. And it's pretty remarkable that it happened that way. And it did. So he ended up moving the mark back and holding the putt, and then holding another putt about a 35-footer on the next hole to tie the match. And we went to 38 holes, and he ended up getting me. But that moment on the 34th hole was certainly the impetus of the book, Hey Tiger, You Need to Move Your Mark Back. It was certainly it's something that I've talked about forever, and I will talk about forever, because it's the greatness of the game. It's the greatness of sport, I think, and helping your opponent, because, like I mentioned at the outset, there's a lot of instances where we try to cheat our opponents, and golf and that moment, I think it's just it's a reminder that goodness can happen in sport, and it should happen in sport, really. And look, I probably wasn't going to stop his run to greatness. Had I beat him that day, he was going to be Tiger Woods. He was going to be great, but it would have been pretty weird to think of Tiger Woods moving into the professional ranks on a loss. So, it's pretty interesting how it all turned out. He wins the Masters 8 months after our match, by the way, too. So turning the golf world on its head. But if I would have beat him that day, I wonder, would he have turned pro the next day? Would he have won 2 tournaments in that fall and then won the Masters? Like, would history had been, altered in some way? And I think probably it would have in a lot of ways.
No doubt about it. See, what a great story. And obviously, I followed the story for many years and followed you as well. But talk a little bit about the resilience that you've had since then, because, again, so many junior golfers, to your point, That's a really monumental moment that you just explained. I've got to do the right thing. You did it under instinct, but yet we're not seeing that necessarily as much today as we probably, we would see back then, right? So tell us about your resilience and what happened, obviously, in your career from that point. You've had a lot of success up to this point. After that, how did that affect you as a golfer?
Yeah, I think immediately it was, I was thrust into I was basically, when he turned pro, I was essentially the top amateur in the rankings. There wasn't official world amateur rankings at the time, I don't believe. And Golf Week had a big amateur rankings that they did. And I was right there at the top. And so, there was, I guess I probably put some undue pressure on myself to live up to, a certain standard. But I had some really good success as an amateur golfer. I won the Dogwood Invitational the next year. I played on the Walker Cup team 2 times.
Nice,
I played on the World Amateur team actually that November, right after the U.S. Amateur. We flew down to the Philippines and competed on the World Amateur stage. So I got to represent my country 3 times on the USGA competitions. In that, I played in the Masters. I got to play in the Masters in 1997. There's lots of PGA Tour players who want to play in the Masters who don't get it, don't get invited because they don't win or aren't ranked high enough. So the things that I was able to do in the game because of that match are so great now, being a PGA professional and being an author and being a broadcaster for ESPN and PGA Tour Live. And, it's all been very, very fulfilling to be a part of the game. Had I lost, 10-8 or 7-6 in that final match, and, things probably would have turned out very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And up to that point, because again, by and large, our audience, a lot of parents, a lot of junior golfers here, you've had tremendous success. 3-time All-American at University of Florida, #1 ranked amateur, just a tremendous amount of success. But how did you get there? Can you talk to the audience a little bit about how you got there? What did you do mentally? What did you do physically? Or did you do anything back then physically? How did you get there?
Yeah, look, golf is very different from, the mid-90s till now. And everybody had a coach. Everybody has a coach now, and seemingly. And for me, between the ages of 14 and 22, I had my college coach at University of Florida, Buddy Alexander, who was a U.S. amateur champion, who was very helpful for me. But he didn't really teach the golf swing per se. Excuse me. He didn't really teach the golf swing per se. And so, he taught us how to practice and whatnot. But, for me, I had a very homemade swing. I won a lot and played very well a lot of times on just true heart and guts and grit. I think that having a pretty golf swing is only a part of the puzzle. I think if, it's you need it, you need good fundamentals, but you also need a lot of heart. You need to be able to get up there and hold that 8-footer for bogey when things are going wrong. When you hit it out of bounds, you need to keep the round together. Those things are not as easy to teach. I think a lot of that is within you. Now there's sports psychologists out there that help people now and whatnot. But for me personally, I think that's what the amazing thing is when I look back. I did everything on my own, essentially. I had my girlfriend caddying for me, she was a golfer, but, she kind of helped just keep my mind in check out there. But she didn't, tell me, oh, hey, this is a 5-iron or this putt's really breaking right to left. Like, she trusted my instincts enough to let me go. And I think that's a great lesson as well for caddies or parents that caddy or whatnot, that your kid has a lot of, your child, your junior golfer has a lot of talent. You don't have to push them too hard. They're going to find out a lot of things on their own. And I learned a lot of things just by self-discovery and, and again, just sheer heart and guts and grit.
Now, it really is the opposite story of the direction that not only golf, but junior golf is going, Steve. It's incredibly inspirational, not only your incredible book and that moment of truth against Tiger Woods in the U.S. Amateur Champion final match. But even to your point of just figuring out things on your own, trial and error. We just seem to have less and less and less. And I mean, even with TrackMan, I mean, I can't tell you how many junior events that we go to where a kid rolls up with TrackMan. And it's like, you're looking around like, wait a second. I mean, it was either a car or the TrackMan. I guess they went with the TrackMan. But, it's certainly, follow the money, right? We always talk about that. But it certainly is a game that is moving more and more away from everything you just described. And there is so much emphasis on winning at 11 and 12. Take me back to those early days of Steve Scott at 11, 12, and 13. Now, there's no doubt in my mind you were great then, too. You don't become the number one amateur in the world and do everything you did with not always having, great hand-eye, I'm sure, and we're always a pretty good player. But, was it ever for fun? I mean, did it ever stop being fun? Did it ever become a job? Those are the things we hear now today with the burnout factor that's just so over the top.
Yeah, for me, I wasn't a kid who really, belonged to the fancy country clubs mostly. I mean, when I was between the ages of 11 and 13, that was really the only time that I belonged to a club. My dad got a membership at Inverary Country Club where they used to play the Jackie Gleason Inverary Classic on the tour before the Honda Classic and came about, and so that kind of got me into it. But most of the time when I was in high school, I filled divots at a public course to get privileges. I didn't have these fancy practice areas and all this stuff. I mean, I played a lot of golf. I don't think I practiced a ton, honestly. I think I got on the golf course a lot and learned how to score. I think that was something that really helped me. I always loved competing. I always loved playing for something, whether it was $1 or, a Coke or whatever, like you play for something. You have to be competitive out there because you have to learn how to win. And I think, I think about Michelle Wee. I think about she had a lot of success, but she didn't quite learn how to win. Like some of the other, and I'm just thinking of her because she's just kind of, stepping away from the game now. But there, you have to learn to win at every level. I think that was what Tiger did, and I think that's what really allowed him to be successful. Instead of trying to jump too far and off your skis there, so to speak, you get very successful with the level that you're at, and then go ahead and move up when you're very comfortable, when you know that you can't do anything more. I think that's what Rose Zhang has recently done. Things are very different. I don't know if I've answered your question that well, but
it's pretty good. That was a good answer. That was a really good one. So we got to go back and say you're a Gator for life, right? They just won the national championship. How do you feel about that?
I love it. Nice to see the Gators take the title. It's been too long. It's been 22 years, I think it was. And so, for JC Deacon, who's a relatively new coach there, he's been around for maybe, 5-6 years. And for him to finally get some success, I'm super happy for him as well. And the whole program, because I think now it'll just open up the whole door for the University of Florida now, being that, junior golfers now we're seeing the Florida Gators have success, and then the transfer portal involved in there, and people are going to, want to transfer there. And I think the Florida Gators program will be in really good shape for a little while.
The one thing I would say, if they had NIL in 1996, after what you did, you probably would have made more money for your decision with a couple holes to go. Looking back at it in today's world of how you got to believe the amount of attention with social media and whatnot. But real quick, we will get your thoughts on that. Just how the amateur game is barely amateur anymore. in one respect, it's really good because of PGA Tour U. You have college players that can not only stay all 4 years, which is, hey, listen, they're getting an education, but they can afford to do it now too because they're getting paid by the same sponsors that will be and would be sponsoring them in the professional game. So your thoughts on the direction that golf and amateur golf is going?
Yeah, I think the water's muddy a little bit when you start involving that NIL money. I mean, certainly it's bigger in the football or basketball or some of the higher money generating sports, but golf, I'm sure is definitely got it's got its hands into golf a little bit, and golf is such a great social sport as well. So golfers can really get involved with companies, I think, better and more than other sports can. So, but yeah, I think it muddies the water for sure. I would agree with you though that back in '96, social media would have been around and NIL would have been around. Especially with the whole story with my girlfriend caddying for me, and it was this kind of magical story, and I got a ton of traction from that moment for even though I didn't quite win, I still feel like I won.
Yeah, and you did, and congratulations on your 24th wedding anniversary. So obviously, that marriage on the golf course turned into a wonderful one off of it. The book is Hey Tiger, Move Your Mark Back. Steve, how can our listeners and viewers and parents and players go ahead and order the book?
Yeah, just go to movethatback.com, and I will personally sign it for you through that site and send you a cool ball marker and whatnot. You can always get it on Amazon. I can't sign it through there, but you can certainly do that. You can have me to your club and speak. I've spoken at over almost 36 clubs and events, big amateur golf events like the Northeast Amateur or whatnot. So yeah, you can do it those ways, but a couple ways to do it.
Awesome. Steve, I do have to say selfishly, I'm going to ask you to speak at a junior event this fall if you have the time. We'll talk off the air, but Stepping Stones Museum, Children's Museum, to help kids. Would love to have you come up and speak on September 14th. So we'll talk about that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Thank you, Steve. The story is an incredible one. It is an inspiration. I'm lucky enough to call you a friend, call you a colleague. Appreciate you coming on the Hub at Junior Golf Podcast. And once again, Hey Tiger, Move Your Mark Back. We encourage all of our listeners and viewers to go out and get a signed copy from Steve. Thanks so much, Steve. We appreciate your time. I'll catch up with you soon, my friend.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Nice to see you.
So, Roger, obviously a really interesting and incredible story on a lot of levels, and a great a testimony to where this game of golf, what it was built on, the tradition, and maybe where it's going. I mean, obviously, we're part of this junior game on a daily situation. Cheating is probably on the rise just because of the sheer importance that it seems that everyone is putting on winning. Can this be put back? Can the genie be put back? Can the toothpaste be put back in the bottle, Roger?
I think Steve made a great point, how competitive it is. And I think it's actually more competitive, I believe, now than it ever has been. And I think for those kids, like we were saying earlier, Ryan, is saying I shot 78 versus saying I shot 80 means something, or at least that's to the junior feels like, hey, I didn't disappoint my parents as badly, right? Unfortunately, I think the more we expand the reach for junior golfers and getting more golfers to play the game, they're coming into the game knowing less rules. I think it's the golfers themselves. Parents may know the rules, but at the end of the day, the players aren't taking responsibility of knowing the rules enough, and maybe unintentionally, cheating, right? Unintentionally, miscounting. So I just think it's gonna, unfortunately, like most things, it's gonna continue to be there. I don't think it's something that kids really want to be doing. I think it just happens, right? Unfortunately, I think it happens.
Steve brought up another great point, Roger. I'd love your perspective on is homemade swing. And he talked about heart and grit as two giant factors in his success. We know with the Performance Development Index, that is something that you've been way out in front of the learning curve on, that there is such a metric as heart and grit. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and how parents can help use PDI to be able to have their kids shoot better scores just by improving that aspect?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, listen, the reason I created the Player Development Index, through the assessment process is that we know that there are a lot of kids out there that are not getting, the looks or the coaching that, some other players are getting, right? So we want to reward those players by having the skills that Steve talked about, which are go get the ball in the hole. I don't care what it looks like. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Get the ball in the hole. So the number one thing is being able to control it well enough to do that. So the assessment part of this allows a player or a parent to see that I can control the golf ball regardless of what my swing looks like. I just know how to get it done. And then a big part of that also is obviously the mental side of it and going through, do you actually know where you are mentally? Do you have the mental skills to handle those things? Do you have the passion and the grit from the grit index that we do to help them understand that, hey, you are actually succeeding, even though it may feel bad that you're not, getting the scores you want right now, but you are succeeding because you're continuing to put yourself out there. So I think those are all things that, more parents and players need to understand, because it's not about the pretty swing. I mean, Tom Purtzer on tour many, many years was voted the best swing on tour. Probably had a very lackluster career. I mean, so, it's ways to get it done. I think Jim Furyk won about 10 times more than Tom Purtzer did. So, so that's part of why we created the player development assessment and getting the index and letting people understand that there's more ways to get it done. Just learn how to control your ball.
All right, Roger, let's talk a little bit about how players and families and parents can get in touch with you. If you do think your player wants to play after high school, certainly college golf is a big process. It can be overwhelming. What is the best way to join the Junior Golf Hub and start that process, begin to see what is available to your son or daughter? Absolutely.
Go to the juniorgolfhub.com, click on create a profile. You'll see in the message part of this show, you'll see a code. You can sign in for free. Check on the player development tab, go in, create your profile. So easy to get in, get some information, learn how you're going to get some exposure to those college, opportunities.
I will tell you a recent story quickly on that. I got a call from a random player from the Nota Begay III Junior Golf National Championship that his son had never broken 80, and he got a call. Not that, I mean, he's going to be a really good player. He is 14. But he got a phone call from a recruiting service for golf that told him, depending on what level they joined, his son would play either Division I, Division II, or Division III. He wanted to ask me about this, and I said, wait a minute. I said, tell me the story again. He said, yeah, if I join the gold stage, my son will play Division I golf. If I join silver, he'll play Division II, and if I join the bronze, he'll guarantee me a Division III contract. I said, okay, first thing you have to do is the next time this guy calls you, you need to have him call me, because that's a conversation I'd like to have. But there are a lot of scams out there, Roger. The Junior Golf Hub, obviously, we're not guaranteeing your son or daughter to play college, but we are guaranteeing that it's going to avail them with real opportunities that exist, real coaches from real universities. So just beware, ladies and gentlemen. There is no guarantee that some service is going to, depending on how much money you give them, that they're going to give your son or daughter a scholarship. Am I right?
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, we do hear that all the time. Again, one of the reasons we created the Junior Golf Hub was to create an educational platform, give parents and kids more education, more knowledge about this whole process, so you don't get scammed by guys who promise things like that because you pay more money. And, right now, you can find all of that information you need to know for free, and, get the college guide and just follow that college guide that's on there. And I'm telling you, it's all you need, and golf talent. You got to be talented. You got to have, you got to be able to score and play golf well. So that's a big part of it.
Absolutely. Episode 16, it was one for the books for sure. We thank Steve Scott. Once again, go out and get his book, Hey Tiger, Move Your Mark Back. And Roger, as always, we appreciate everything that Junior Golf Hub not only does for this podcast, but of course what it does for junior golf. Parents, PDI is real, the Player Development Index. And if you have interest or you just have questions about golf on what happens when your son goes to 8th grade or 9th grade, or where they should be, or how you do try to get exposure, that can all be answered without spending, $20,000-$30,000 for someone that's promising that they're going to get you a Division I contract. So a lot of really good stuff today. Enjoyed the podcast as always. So for Roger Nick, for Steve Scott, I'm Ryan Burr saying until next time, this has been the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast.